Thank you very much. And it is a pleasure to be last, as seems to be per usual. I will try to keep myself brief and make it very exciting so that nobody falls asleep in this last few minutes. I am from the USA, from the East Coast in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am also an occupational therapist. And one of the unique advantages I have is that I am a full-time occupational therapist at our center. And that gives me a unique advantage to play around with new devices and things that come on the market, such as this myoelectric orthotic, which I'm going to tell you about today. So the objectives: to increase the knowledge about myoelectric orthoses and understand the functional implications for the client with ALS MND. Now, there was a third objective on this, and if you're one of those people that reads the abstracts in the book, the third objective was to present study results. Well, when you work with a large hospital system and a company that is doing myoelectric orthoses, months go by while contracts are written and lawyers are looking over things and getting through. And so I'm going to be talking more about the device and less about the study today. So some of the history. In 1989, this guy on the left, this was a myoelectric orthosis. This was sort of one of the first devices, and he is wired up. It looks like he has got Frankenstein arms on. And this is actually a gentleman, one of the first studies that was done on a person with ALS MND. And they were trying to give him some control of his arm with the device. The one on the right is one that is actually commercially available today. Looks a little sleeker, looks a little nicer, a whole lot fewer wires. And so I'm going to talk to you about this myoelectric orthosis. So what is it? It's basically a brace. It's an arm brace made out of the same material that an ankle brace or a hand brace might be made out of, that same sort of durable, moldable plastic. It supports the weakened upper extremity. The motor portion is at the elbow. And so this device is used most often for elbow flexion and elbow extension. Okay? But as an occupational therapist, I can think of about 100 things that my patients would love to do with some elbow flexion and extension, and I'm sure the rest of you probably can as well. It does weigh a bit. It weighs 2 3/4 pounds. Depending on the limb size, might be a little bit bigger, just more material if the person had a larger arm. They typically put a hand piece on it. They don't have to, but a lot of folks that have elbow weakness also have some hand weakness, and they'll need a little bit of support so they can use that upper extremity as a gross assist. So how does it work? I think this one is a video. Let me show that one quick. Can you pull up? So I'm just giving her cues. Push back down, or relax back down. So we'll let this play and then I'll tell you a little bit about it. So what we've got in the background is a little computer biofeedback device that shows when she's firing off her biceps and when she's relaxing her biceps. And so what it allows the therapist to do is actually program the device so that you've got active motion. What is really cool about this is that you can have a lot of motion and you can have just a muscle twitch, and you can set the device to either, when your muscle twitches, to come all the way to your face, to bend into full elbow flexion, or you can set it up so that it only moves as you're giving that power and as you're moving. You can also set up only biceps or only triceps or both, which is a pretty amazing thing as well. So it does not shocking the person. It is not giving electrical stimulation to the muscle. It is simply amplifying some weak motion. It just is simply sensing the motion. The electrodes are built into the brace. It is fit for each person, and it just reads the muscle signals. So the user is completely controlling their own arm. It just amplifies what they can do and is programmable over time, which is exciting for our folks that are losing muscle strength over time. They could start off with a very minimal amount of muscle weakness and then go on until they could barely have a muscle twitch in that arm. So why would a client with ALS MND use it? Well, definitely to increase the functional use of their upper extremity. I mean, we can all think of things like feeding themselves, doing grooming, doing computer tasks, reaching, some complex tasks that actually there are 4 or 5 folks in the US who have ALS MND who are using this device, and one of the gentleman's goals was to continue to pull up his pants. And that was his primary goal. And that elbow flexion allowed that to continue to happen. And so you saw in one of the pictures, somebody was carrying a laundry basket, perhaps doing some light meal prep, those sorts of things, and to really lengthen the time that they can use their upper extremity. Overall, to decrease the fatigue, if you barely have to twitch your muscle and your hand comes all the way to your mouth, that's an amazing difference and an amazing ability to deal with that fatigue. Okay. So some of the precautions, certainly overuse could be a precaution. This device is often used in patients with stroke who are using it as an exercise device. So there is that potential precaution of overuse. However, because it is so programmable and because we can really set those thresholds at whatever we want and the amount of motion at whatever we want, it really, we can deal with the overuse part of it. It is a bit heavy. It's over 2 pounds, heading toward 3. And so a lot of times if someone has a weak shoulder, they will use a harness to help support the device so it's not dragging down the arm and causing more of a subluxation. If you have significant contractures, a subluxation greater than 2 fingers, or pain, certainly this is not the device for you. Poor cognition, things like follow-through and motivation certainly wouldn't make sense to do this kind of device. Severe spasticity or hypertonicity, pain or hypersensitivity, and then people who are just not receptive to technology. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. This is a device they really have to buy into. It's an expensive device. In the US, it is running about $30,000 US dollars. And so this is not for the faint of heart. But those people who do buy into technology and are willing to give this a go, I think it has some applications. So it can be adapted with adjustments of increasing and decreasing the sensitivity, the speed of the motion, how much the motion the device does with an impulse. So either you can have it come directly to your mouth, you can have it come part of the way, you can have it only move when the person's actually actively moving. And as long as there is a trace muscle, it can be adapted. This is a video of a gentleman with ALS MND. On the right, he is not using the device, and on the left he is, and they run simultaneously, so if we can show that video. He's just eating a cookie, or attempting to. Try and try on the right, he's just not getting that cookie to his mouth. That's a frustrating prospect there on the right. And he finally gives up. Well, on the left, he's eaten that cookie until he's full. We've also got a video of some ways that people can practice and learn how to use that. If I could show this video. So basically, she's just learning how to control the device. And they're figuring out some of the programming. Do they make it come all the way up? Does she control it just when she moves? That sort of thing. Do they use biceps and triceps or just biceps? Those sorts of things in this control practice. And they're using the rod to be able to sort of say, to be able to get a visual of what she's doing and how she's doing that. So funding sources in the US, Medicare specifically, is determining this as an exercise device, so are not wanting to cover it. I was approached and saw it at a conference and was interested enough to actually simultaneously approach them to say, if with ALS, in some circumstances with chronic especially, we're not supposed to exercise, then maybe I can say that this cannot be an exercise device, and maybe we'll get this thing covered through insurance for some of our patients who really could use it as a functional device and not as an exercise device, especially because we can factor in not having them overuse their limbs. And so my study, hopefully very, very soon, fingers crossed, is going to be looking at an N of 1 just first, and then moving on to hopefully an N of 20. The makers of this device are excited to say, to have it shown as not just an exercise device, of course. I'm excited because I think this can really help my folks who are struggling, especially with limb onset, upper body limb onset flail arm, that sort of thing, because they're losing function. I put them in mobile arm supports. I've used the Kneader from the UK. I've used a number of different devices. but none of them, they all attach to the table or the wheelchair or something else. This actually goes along with the person. And when you have people who are very, very weak in the upper body and relatively strong in the lower body, they have a very difficult time doing simple things like feeding themselves, like wiping themselves, like pulling up their pants, all these other things while they're walking around just fine. And this is sort of the perfect population for this. So we're going to be following them until they either can elicit no motion in the device or until death. That's the plan, is sort of watch them through the whole period where they can use the device. Probably coming at every month. Most of the people that will be in the study will be living relatively locally. And at each study visit, we'll do the ALS-FRS-R, we'll do some muscle testing, we'll look at a quality of life scale, some active range of motion, as well as functional tests with the device and without the device. So I can take some video of the gentleman eating a cookie with and without the device, or attempting to feed themselves, to scratch their head or their face, to brush their teeth, to do all the things that we take for granted, even using the triceps portion to help push themselves off a chair. All these things are going to be very, very important and I think are possible. So I'm excited about this device. I have no financial obligation or interest in this company, but I just think it's cool. And I love to share from the occupational therapy perspective, cool equipment. So some references, there's not much out there. There's the one from 1989 on a gentleman with ALS, and then a couple other ones that have just been conference proceedings, that sort of thing, but nothing really out there for this population. So here's my contact information, and then also the website of this device. It's called MyoPro, just so you've got that as well. Thank you.
It's always great to end a conference on a challenge for the future and a future opportunity. And clearly, equipment technology is the way forward. Any questions for Amber? Well, I know you're desperate to get to a drink. One down here.
Hi, Amber.
Yep.
Hi, Mike Chow from the United States. So it's an expensive device. Are you trying this bilaterally in your N of 1 or?
Well, what we're going to do, the company has offered with the N of 1 to provide the first device. It is still being covered somewhat by private insurances. Just Medicare in the US is not covering it. So what we're going to do is start, yes, we'll have a lottery. We'll start with one person who will get the device. And then the others, the company sort of, I think, is hedging their bets. They're trying to sort of see how it's going to go and what kind of study investigator I am and how the patient uses the device and that sort of thing. I'm hoping I can push them into 20 devices. We'll see how it goes. But if it's worth it to them, because Medicare is big business, and if we can get these devices covered in another way, that would be ideal.
Any other questions?
I did want to mention that they are available outside of the US as well. You just have to go to that website. So.
Well, join with me in thanking Amber.